So the cerebral cortex is what we look at as being like a layer or a covering in this tissue. Okay? So the thalamus, the job would be to take that sensory information, send it where it needs to go, so that we can get the response back to create the effect. Okay, so the thalamus is considered that relay station. Your textbook, once again, is going to go into great detail about this structure of this area. No. Okay? Like I said, there are 23 nuclei. They're going to fall into one of 5 groups. The 5 groups, what do you notice about these terms right here? They're giving me direction. They're letting me know position to my body. Okay? For example, anterior, posterior, ventral, lateral, medial. Do you see that? Do you see how they're classifying them into a position? It's not that based on what the textbook is going to tell you about all of this structure and everything. I don't care about that. Okay? I want you to be familiar that we have, and basically the groups are based on position. Okay? Does everybody see that? Now, here is what becomes interesting. The nuclei that might be found in one of these 5 groups. What do you notice about information that it handles? Alice?
5 cents to 6, I guess.
We're dealing with every sense of the body. And some that are going to come into play with my higher order parts of the brain, the cerebrum. Okay? Memory, emotion. I've got information going to the cerebellum. I've got information that's going to be dealing with that limbic system. I've got information for sight. I've got information, well, not sight, sound. I have information covering lots of the senses for the body. Okay? Sight gets a little special, as well as smell, because they are termed special senses for a reason, because they are extremely special. Okay? So we're dealing with all of this sensory information that has to go in, and it is up to this little area of the brain to distribute that information to the region of the cortex, the cerebral cortex, that it needs to go to. Now the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, it will be coming back to us. We will go into the hypothalamus a lot more when we get into the endocrine system. It is one of the most interesting areas of the body to me, for the hypothalamus. Now, it extends all the way to the optic chiasm. It has what's called mammillary bodies. The primary function to relay signals from the limbic system to the thalamus. We get a connection to the pituitary gland, which, like I said, most of these models, they've fallen off. This one's barely hanging on. But that's what they're trying to show you. They're trying to show you it hanging on, because that's what the pituitary gland does. The pituitary gland swings, what looks like it's swinging, from that hypothalamus to the pituitary gland by this branch. Okay? It sits in the sella turcica. Does anybody remember that from part 1 with the bones? Okay? Because that's the case, because now that I have this hypothalamus, this thing, the part that looks like a W right here, with the pituitary gland swinging off of it by way of the infundibulum, the pituitary gland sits in bone. What does that tell you about? It's very well protected, and if that's the case, it must be very important. Oh, yeah, to say the least. We'll get back to that when it comes to, when we get to the endocrine system. Yes, major control center of my endocrine, and therefore autonomic nervous system, which is our next chapter, chapter 15. Yes, major role in homeostasis. Homeostasis for the entire body. Do you need, for example, since we mentioned it earlier, do I need growth hormone now at the age I'm at? When do I need growth hormone? Most of the time, we associate growth hormone for a child that's, itty bitty baby that's going to grow up. I need growth hormone 24/7, 365, 366 if it's a leap year. Even now. The difference is, you get older, it decreases. Thyroid hormone. Do I need that now? Oh, yeah. Okay, so this endocrine system, this hypothalamus with the connection to this endocrine system, it's going to maintain homeostasis for my entire body, along with my nervous system. But do you see the connection of the brain to the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus is part of the brain tissue. The difference is, the hypothalamus did not become what's known as adult brain tissue. It stayed embryonic. This whole area, this thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, every bit of it is still considered not adult tissue. It is embryonic. Primitive of all primitive. We're going to see that the control centers, the nuclei, are going to be responsible for hormone secretion, autonomic effects, the viscera of my body, the organs, thermoregulation, the heat of the body, food and water intake, sleep, circadian rhythms, memory, emotional behavior, sexual response, anything that works to keep the species alive. And every bit of it is primitive. It is so cool. Trust me. The epithalamus, not quite as fun. Okay. Most of it is the pineal gland, also known pineal gland, and then the abuela. Basically, relay information from limbic system to the midbrain. It's near the third ventricle. Not a whole lot going on there. Okay? Just, well, not that we kind of know of right now at this point in time. Thalamus, and then, of course, my hypothalamus are the most fun. This is my hypothalamus. As you can see, once again, lots of nuclei, lots of areas of nerve cell bodies and synapses. Not easy to remember the groups that they've been put into, okay? But at this point in time, we come back to the hypothalamus, all right? I will not be expecting you to know these, all right? Because we will be coming back to this. But if you will notice on what these nuclei control, there's not a part of the body that isn't controlled by the hypothalamus. Every part of the body has some type of control. Whether it's emotions, whether it's thirst, whether it's appetite, whether it's my biological clock, whatever the case might be, the hypothalamus is involved. Amazing area of the brain. All right, any questions before we get to the part that we normally think of as the brain? All right. Now, based on what we've talked about so far, me personally, you're going into neurology and stuff like that, or if you have to go to a neurologist and stuff like that, let's hope they've learned a lot of this stuff very well, okay? Because there are things that go wrong. Now, in those other areas of the brain that we've looked at, the brainstem, the cerebellum, okay? Well, a lot of that is based on homeostasis, maintaining what our body's doing. The largest part of the brain, this is my voluntary area. The part that people tend to think of when you say brain. Seat of voluntary motor control and my mental processes. In the grand scheme of things, this part's not fun at all. But that's just me, okay? Now, on the anatomy, areas that are very prominent, yes, two hemispheres separated once again by the longitudinal. Connect the two by way of that corpus callosum. We mentioned the gyri and the sulci, gyri being the big folds, sulci being the little indentations between them. Now, the gyri and the sulci, they are going to take each hemisphere and divide them. Because when we look at the hemisphere, we've got 4 that are visible, and 1, if you could pick this one up, you would see the insula. All right? So, if we look at the separation of the lobes, frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. And if we could pick a part of it up, we would see the insula. Here's what they're going to do. It's my frontal lobe. Abstract thought, explicit memory, mood, motivation, foresight planning, decision making, emotional control, social judgment, voluntary motor control, speech production. That's from your frontal lobe. The insula